All right, continuing on. Sorry for being cut off in the last video. I ran out of time. What I was saying at the end there is they came out with this Oxy-Neo in February 2012, but inevitably, even though it was supposed to be harder to crush or break down, even when I was working in the field, I had clients who I knew were in possession of the same substance and were finding ways to crush it, break it down, and abuse it. So again, we kind of keep repeating these patterns. The next drug we're going to talk about is fentanyl. Excuse me. So fentanyl, it's important to know that fentanyl is approximately 100 times stronger than morphine. So yes, it is more potent than even heroin or than Oxycontin. Typically, it's sold in transdermal patch or pill form, and the intended use of this drug is for pain for those who are suffering with cancer and have a tolerance to other opioids. So again, it's a really strong opioid. I'm going to post this McLean's link for you guys to watch on your own, and I'm going to attempt to play the video clip in this recording, but I was having a little bit of difficulty with the sound, so bear with me.
And can substitute for heroin, the white powder. So drug manufacturers or drug manufacturers mix it in because they want to get everything high, and it's really cheap to make. It's quite generic. Fentanyl is a different category, strength-wise, versus to Oxycontin. There were deaths that were attributable to Oxycontin. However, we're noticing since the switch to fentanyl, the way that they're using it, not the intended way that it's recommended by the company or the physician. If they're smoking it, there's a problem with overdose. One occurrence that we actually observed a person consumed fentanyl in a car with an 18-month-old baby. It was done through smoking with fentanyl, so the patch was turned into a vapor, and the vapors was in the vehicle right beside a small child. If one person in the family uses fentanyl, even if they consume one single patch per week, I mean, you're looking at $1,500 to $2,000 a month habit at the very low end. Imagine some of the people that consume a single patch every day. It destroys families, for sure.
We decided to be open about it because we want to do anything that we can to spare other families from going through this too. We really noticed probably not till the beginning of December that something wasn't right, and he was looking more disheveled. He was having a really hard time sleeping. That was it. He was up late at night and saying, "I've got such anxiety, Mom, I've got anxiety," and started really crying and saying he wanted to come home. And it was a shock, absolute shock, when that phone call came through. He said, "Kelly's gone."
Lots of my friends have passed from opiates, Oxycontin, fentanyl, morphine, the whole range of opiates. So that began my train of thought of ultimately quitting. But it wasn't until my best friend passed away. It felt like I was going to die many times, and methadone off. Saved my life.
Apologies for the sound there, guys. If it didn't work, hopefully you just skipped through the video. Again, I'll post this link for you. But essentially, the article talks about a friend who started getting this guy into abuse of Oxycontin, which then progressed on to to fentanyl. And within a year, they were going through 2 of the patches, each designed to provide 72 hours of pain relief for someone with intense chronic pain. So there again, we're thinking about tolerance, we're thinking about abuse potential, we're thinking about toxicity, right? Which led ultimately to the overdose of his best friend, which is why the guy in the video is now trying to quit his use of fentanyl. And he did mention methadone, which will be the next topic that we discuss. So methadone is one of the primary treatments that exist, at least in our country, our society, for opioid users who want to stop using. The opioids, it's an opioid with limited producing euphoria properties. It's less potent than heroin or morphine. It prevents withdrawal and sickness, which is major. Again, remember that negative reinforcement piece. So methadone can help to eliminate that as a barrier. And it's used exclusively to prevent withdrawal in addicts. It's still an opiate agonist, meaning that it still mimics those endorphins in our brain. But again, people who are on methadone aren't getting the same high from it so long as they are taking and receiving the appropriate dose. So though it doesn't produce euphoria when taken orally, that is not the case when it's injected. So when it's injected, it can produce that euphoria. So methadone has its abuse potential just the same. Clinics typically monitor methadone handling. They will delegate the dose that each individual gets based on their circumstances. And once a person has demonstrated sort of a commitment to being clean and using methadone, then they're given what are called carries, which means that they can take home some of their doses. Other people who are new to using methadone or who have relapsed and abused along the way are required to go in on a daily basis to get their methadone. Naloxone and methadone is also used. It's another non-medicinal use of methadone. Naloxone is an antagonist. So thinking back to harm reduction, methadone can be used to taper a person off of opiates, or it can be used to maintain their addiction with those less harmful effects, which is the essence of harm reduction. So take a moment to think about why methadone is less harmful. And remember, thinking about toxicity, dependence, crime, why is methadone less harmful? Ultimately, because it has less intense side effects. The use can be monitored, which I mentioned, so people are going in on a daily basis. The drug itself is monitored, so you're not buying from someone off the street and you have no idea what the drug has been cut with. It keeps the client engaged with the healthcare system. Again, that goes hand in hand with harm reduction. And it provides less need for the individual to chase their next fix. It just maintains that stable level so that they don't have to go through withdrawal, so that they're not in a state of euphoric high, and essentially can lead a so-called normal, and I say that with quotations, life. Reduces involvement with crime and prostitution. And then moving on to other pharmacological treatments. So methadone is still the primary one, but a couple of newer pharmacological treatments have come on board. So naloxone, which is also known as Narcan, is an opiate antagonist. So remember, antagonist means that it blocks the receptor. So it blocks the endorphins or the mimicking endorphins from being absorbed. So it has no euphoric effects whatsoever. It's actually used to reverse the effects of overdose, which I mentioned you'll watch an example of that in Through Blue Lens. It also shortens but intensifies withdrawal because it's administered in a high dose, and it's used in combination with clonidine or sedatives for a rapid detox for those who are seeking that. Naltrexone, which is also known as Revia, is the long-acting form of naloxone. So they're going to sound similar. There's naloxone, naltrexone. They are a similar drug, but again, naltrexone is just the longer-acting form. And it is also used to block the euphoric effects of opiates. It's prescribed by those who are motivated to abstain, who are really ready and prepared for that. And it can also be used to treat alcohol dependence, which we'll talk about or have talked about in our unit on alcohol. Okay, so this is the other one that is rising in popularity, kind of hand in hand with methadone. It's called buprenorphine. Its brand name is Subutex, or you might have heard of it called Suboxone. So this is mixed opiate agonist and antagonist, so it does a little bit of both. It's also prescribed as an analgesic with lower risk of abuse. So again, similar to methadone. They have milder withdrawal and diminished agonist effects at higher doses. And then the example of Suboxone that I mentioned is a mix of buprenorphine and naloxone. And this is used for rapid detox withdrawal and for low risk analgesic. So buprenorphine in itself is Subutex, and then Suboxone, which is a mix of the two. Both of them are agonist/antagonist and can be used for those who want to stop using the euphoric producing effects of opioids. In summary, what we have covered: think about the toxicity of opioids. Think about the dependence potential or liability of the drug, irrespective of individual variables. And think about the crime potential that could be involved combining toxicity, dependence, and the dependence liability. It's also important when we're talking about any drug. So opioids get like a very bad reputation, and there's a lot of stigma around it. But remember that this drug came about and still exists. Opioids in some capacity still exist for its beneficial uses, such as in third world countries to help prevent gastric issues, diarrhea, things like that. It's also still used as cough suppressant as a treatment as well. And then, of course, for pain relief, like the fentanyl patch exists for good reason. So it's important to critically think about harm reduction. We've talked about it in a lot of positive ways. We've had lots of discussion around that, but your textbook has a couple of articles that talk about some of the not so great aspects of harm reduction and some of that opposite view and perspective. So you should read those boxes and just, again, take a critical eye, analytical thinking when you're reflecting on harm reduction and your view of these strategies. And lastly, I will end on the point of always meeting your client where he or she is at. Our role in the SSW field is to do just that. So regardless of toxicity, dependence, crime that our client could be involved in, we are meeting him or her where they're at. So if they're at a point of wanting to reduce the harms but continue their use, then we might help them with things like needle exchange. If they want to reduce the harm as well as cease the euphoric effects to get to a more functional day-to-day level, then we might encourage and advise some of these things called methadone or Suboxone. If the individual wants to abstain altogether, then we might help them get connected with withdrawal management services. Ultimately, my point is that you are always meeting your client where he or she is at and not working harder than they're willing to work. I hope that was helpful, and I hope the video worked okay. See you guys in class.